In the shadowed halls of Blackthorn Hall, a storm rages as Hercule Poirot arrives to unravel a chilling mystery. Sir Reginald Blackthorn lies dead in the locked velvet room, a jade-handled dagger in his chest, the air thick with secrets. Threatening letters, a hidden passage, a tampered sedative, and a smudge of red wax point to a killer among the household. Lady Eleanor's icy resolve, Charles's reckless desperation, Miss Winthrop's trembling fear, Dr. Hargrove's guilty conscience, or the glamorous Vivian Lyle's calculated charm. As Poirot's little grey cells weave through lies and betrayal, one truth emerges. In this opulent prison of velvet and deceit, no one is innocent, and the murderer's motive is as deadly as the storm outside. Will you dare to uncover the truth? Chapter 1. The Invitation to Blackthorn Hall. The November rain lashed against the windows of the Rolls-Royce, its tyres hissing through the muddy lanes of the Sussex countryside. Hercule Poirot, ensconced in the plush leather seat, adjusted his immaculate black tie and frowned at the dreary landscape. His gloved fingers traced the edge of a cream-coloured envelope, embossed with the crest of Blackthorn Hall. The letter within, penned in a hurried yet elegant hand, had summoned him from his cosy London flat with a promise of intrigue. A matter of utmost delicacy, Sir Reginald Blackthorn had written, requiring the singular genius of Hercule Poirot. The words flattered, yet the urgency beneath them stirred his restless mind. The car slowed before the looming silhouette of Blackthorn Hall, a Gothic edifice of weathered stone and pointed arches, its turrets piercing the storm-laden sky. Poirot stepped out, his patent leather shoes sinking slightly into the wet gravel, and pulled his overcoat tighter against the chill. A butler, tall and gaunt as a spectre, emerged from the shadowed doorway. "Monsieur Poirot," he intoned, his voice as crisp as the November air. "I am Grayson. Sir Reginald awaits you in the velvet room." Poirot followed, noting the butler's measured steps and the faint tremor in his hands. The hall's interior was a study in faded grandeur, oak-panelled walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow him down the corridor. A grand staircase spiraled upward, its crimson carpet worn but proud. The air carried the scent of old wood and wax polish, undercut by a faint metallic tang Poirot could not yet place. The velvet room, reached through a pair of carved double doors, was a revelation. Its walls, draped in rich crimson velvet, absorbed the light of 3 crystal chandeliers, casting a warm, almost oppressive glow. A massive mahogany table dominated the centre, surrounded by high-backed chairs upholstered in the same sumptuous fabric. A fire crackled in the marble hearth, yet the room felt heavy, as if it held secrets in its very weave. Sir Reginald Blackthorn rose from an armchair, his florid face glistening with perspiration despite the cool evening. A man in his late 50s, portly and balding, he wore his wealth uneasily, his tailored suit straining at the seams. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, extending a damp hand, "your presence is a godsend. I am in dire need of your talents." Poirot bowed slightly, his eyes scanning the man's anxious demeanour. "You speak of delicacy, Sir Reginald. Pray, enlighten Hercule Poirot." Before Sir Reginald could respond, the doors swung open, admitting a procession of 5 figures, each as distinct as characters in a play. Lady Eleanor Blackthorn entered first, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her eyes sharp as cut glass beneath arched brows. Her black silk gown rustled with authority, but Poirot noted the tightness of her lips, a sign of suppressed emotion. Behind her came Charles Blackthorn, the couple's only son, a lanky young man of 30, with a gambler's easy grin and eyes that darted too quickly. His dinner jacket was impeccably cut, yet a faint stain on his cuff suggested carelessness, or worse. Miss Clara Winthrop, the governess, followed, her mousy brown hair pinned tightly, her grey dress blending into the shadows. Her hands twisted nervously, and she avoided Poirot's gaze as if fearful of scrutiny. Dr. Malcolm Hargrove, the family physician, entered next, a lean man with a scholar's stoop and spectacles perched low on his nose. His calm demeanour contrasted with the faint tremor in his fingers as he adjusted his tie. Finally, Miss Vivian Lyle swept in, a vision in emerald satin, her blonde curls cascading artfully. The actress's smile was radiant, but her eyes held a calculating glint, as if she were perpetually performing. Sir Reginald cleared his throat, drawing Poirot's attention. "These are my family and associates," he said, hesitating over the last word. "I have gathered you all because I trust Monsieur Poirot to resolve a matter that threatens us all." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And what precisely is this matter?" Sir Reginald produced a small bundle of letters from his pocket. Their edges crumpled. "These arrived over the past fortnight," he said, his voice low. "Anonymous, venomous things. They warn of my death, here, in this very room." Poirot took the letters, his gloved fingers careful not to smudge potential evidence. The paper was cheap, the ink smudged, but the words were stark. "Your sins will find you out. The velvet room will be your tomb." His grey cells hummed. "You suspect someone in this room, n'est-ce pas?" Sir Reginald's eyes flickered to his wife, then away. "I suspect everyone, and no one. That is why I need you, Poirot." The fire crackled, casting long shadows across the velvet walls. Poirot studied the assembled group, their faces a tableau of unease. Lady Eleanor's fingers tightened on her pearl necklace. Charles lit a cigarette with a trembling hand. Miss Winthrop shrank further into her chair. Dr. Hargrove polished his spectacles unnecessarily, and Miss Lyle's smile faltered just for a moment. That night, as the storm reached a fevered pitch, a piercing scream tore through the hall. Poirot, roused from his guest room, hurried to the velvet room, his dressing gown flapping about him. The door was locked, but Grayson appeared with a master key. Inside, Sir Reginald lay sprawled across the Persian rug, his eyes wide with shock, a jade-handled dagger protruding from his chest. The chandelier above gleamed coldly, as if mocking the stillness of death. Poirot knelt, his mind already racing. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "the game, it has begun." Chapter 2. The Scene of the Crime. The rain continued its merciless assault on Blackthorn Hall, the wind howling like a chorus of restless spirits. Within the velvet room, the air was thick with the metallic scent of blood and the oppressive weight of tragedy. Hercule Poirot stood motionless, his sharp eyes surveying the grim tableau before him. Sir Reginald Blackthorn lay sprawled across the intricate Persian rug, his lifeless hand clutching at nothing, the jade-handled dagger buried deep in his chest. The chandelier above cast its golden light, illuminating the scene with an almost theatrical clarity. Yet the shadows in the corners seemed to whisper secrets. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers hovering over the dagger without touching it. The weapon was an exquisite piece, its handle carved with intricate floral motifs, the jade glowing faintly under the chandelier's glow. The blade had struck with precision, piercing the heart, and the lack of defensive wounds suggested Sir Reginald had been caught unawares. Poirot's moustache twitched as he noted the position of the body. Sir Reginald had fallen backward, his head tilted toward the hearth, as if he had been standing near the mahogany table when the blow came. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his voice soft but resonant in the silent room. A crime of passion, perhaps, yet executed with such cold calculation. The door creaked open, and Inspector Japp burst in, his overcoat dripping from the storm. His ruddy face was set in a scowl, though his eyes widened at the sight of the corpse. "Good Lord, Poirot, you've landed us in a proper mess this time. Murder, plain as day, and in a locked room no less." Poirot rose, brushing imaginary dust from his impeccable suit. Précisément, mon ami. The room, it was locked from the inside, was it not? The key remains in the lock, the windows are bolted, and the storm outside ensures no one entered from without. A puzzle, Inspector, but one that Hercule Poirot shall unravel. Japp snorted, crouching beside the body. This dagger's a Blackthorn heirloom, I'd wager. Seen it in their family portraits. Means it's someone in the house, Poirot. Family, staff, or that actress friend of his. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Perhaps, Inspector, but the little grey cells, they urge caution. We must consider not only the weapon, but the opportunity, the motive, and most importantly, the psychology of the crime. Grayson, the butler, stood rigidly by the door, his gaunt face pale but composed. The rest of the household soon gathered, drawn by the scream and the commotion. Lady Eleanor Blackthorn entered first, her silk dressing gown tightly cinched, her silver hair slightly dishevelled, but her posture unyielding. Her eyes flickered to her husband's body, and for a moment her lips trembled, though she quickly regained her composure. "This is monstrous," she said, her voice low and controlled. "Who could have done such a thing?" Charles Blackthorn followed. His face flushed from what Poirot suspected was more than just shock. His tie was askew, and his hands bore fresh scratches, thin red lines crisscrossing the backs. He stared at his father's body, then looked away, lighting a cigarette with a trembling match. "Bloody hell!" he muttered, exhaling a cloud of smoke. "The old man didn't deserve this." Miss Clara Winthrop, the governess, hovered at the edge of the group, her small frame trembling in a plain cotton nightdress. Her eyes were wide with fear, and she clutched a shawl tightly around her shoulders, as if it could shield her from the horror. Dr. Malcolm Hargrove, the family physician, entered with a medical bag in hand, though one glance at Sir Reginald confirmed there was no need for it. His spectacles glinted as he adjusted them, his face a mask of professional detachment. A single thrust, he noted, almost to himself. Death would have been instantaneous. Miss Vivian Lyle was the last to arrive, her emerald negligee clinging to her curves, her blonde curls artfully tousled. She gasped dramatically, pressing a hand to her chest, but Poirot noted the calculated pause before her reaction, as if she had rehearsed it. "Oh, Reginald!" she cried, her voice catching. "How could this happen?" Poirot clapped his hands sharply, drawing their attention. "Mesdames et messieurs, a tragedy has occurred, and it is imperative that we establish the facts. Inspector Japp will take your statements, but first, I must examine the scene with care. Please, remain in the drawing room until called." Japp grumbled but began herding the group out, leaving Poirot alone with the body and Grayson, who lingered like a shadow. Poirot circled the room, his eyes darting from the locked door to the bolted windows, then to the velvet drapes that hung heavily against the walls. He paused by the mahogany table, where a crystal decanter of brandy sat undisturbed. 2 glasses beside it, one half full, the other untouched. "Interesting," he murmured, sniffing the glasses. The half-full one carried a faint medicinal odour, not entirely masked by the brandy's aroma. He turned his attention to the dagger, noting a faint smudge of red wax on its handle, barely visible against the jade. "This is no candle wax," he said to himself, "but sealing wax, perhaps from a letter sealed in haste." He filed the detail away, his mind already weaving connections. The door, locked from the inside, was a heavy oak affair, its brass key still in place. Poirot tested it, confirming it turned smoothly. The windows, tall and narrow, were secured with iron bolts, their panes rattling under the storm's fury. No footprints marred the sill outside, and the mud beyond was untouched. A locked room, Poirot mused, yet every lock has its key, and every crime its method. He approached the hearth, where the fire had dwindled to embers. A small pile of ash caught his eye, the remnants of burnt paper. Using a pair of tongs, He retrieved a charred fragment, its edges curling, but a few words still legible. "Sins will find." It matched the threatening letters Sir Reginald had shown him. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Someone sought to destroy evidence, but they were not thorough. Grayson cleared his throat, breaking Poirot's reverie. "Shall I summon the others, monsieur?" "Not yet," Poirot replied, his tone sharp. "Tell me, Monsieur Grayson, where were you when the scream was heard?" "In the pantry, sir, polishing the silver. I heard Miss Winthrop's cry, and came at once with the master key." Poirot nodded, noting the butler's steady gaze, but the slight clench of his jaw. "And you saw no one in the corridor?" "No one, monsieur." "Very well. You may go, but remain available." As Grayson departed, Japp returned, his notebook in hand. "Right, Poirot. I've got their initial statements. Lady Eleanor says she was in her bedroom, reading by lamplight. Charles claims he was in the billiard room, knocking balls about. Miss Winthrop was in her attic quarters, preparing lessons for the Blackthorn ward, young Master Henry, who's away at school. Dr. Hargrove was in his study, writing up patient notes. And Miss Lyle, well, she says she was in her guest suite, writing letters to her theatre friends. None of them admit to being near the Velvet Room." Poirot tilted his head. "And yet, someone was here. The scream, it was Miss Winthrop's, oui?" Japp nodded. "She says she came downstairs for a glass of water and saw the door ajar. Peeked in, saw Sir Reginald, and screamed her head off." "Interesting," Poirot said, his eyes drifting to the door. "The door was ajar, yet now it is locked. A curious discrepancy." He moved to the velvet drapes, running his gloved hand along their folds. His fingers paused at a slight irregularity, a seam where the fabric met the wall. With a gentle tug, he revealed a hidden panel, its edges flush with the woodwork. A push, and it swung open, revealing a narrow cobwebbed passage. "Voila!" Poirot said, his voice tinged with triumph. "The locked room. It is not so locked after all." Japp peered into the passage, his face skeptical. "A secret passage? In this day and age? You're pulling my leg, Poirot." "Not at all, mon ami. Old houses, they are full of such surprises. This passage, it may lead us to the truth." Poirot lit a small pocket torch and stepped into the passage, its walls damp and smelling of mildew. The narrow corridor twisted downward, its stone floor uneven. After a few yards, it ended at a small door, barely visible in the gloom. Poirot pushed it open, emerging into the servants' quarters, specifically the butler's pantry. A silver tray sat on a table, a polishing cloth beside it, confirming Grayson's alibi, or at least his location. "Someone knew of this passage," Poirot said, re-entering the velvet room. "Someone who could enter and leave unseen, locking the door behind them." Japp scratched his head. "But who, Poirot? And why leave the key in the lock?" "To create the illusion of a locked room," Poirot replied. "The murderer is clever, but not clever enough for Hercule Poirot." He returned to the body, examining Sir Reginald's clothing. The waistcoat was unbuttoned, revealing a small tear in the shirt, as if something had been snatched from his person. Poirot's fingers probed the pocket, finding only a crumpled handkerchief. "Something is missing," he murmured. "A paper, perhaps, or a key." Japp called the household back for questioning, and Poirot observed each carefully. Lady Eleanor maintained her icy composure, but her hands betrayed a faint tremble as she described her evening of solitary reading. Charles's story of billiards was vague, and Poirot noted the scratches again, now partially hidden by his cuffs. Miss Winthrop, still shaken, insisted she had only glanced into the room, her fear genuine, but her story incomplete. Dr. Hargrove spoke of his medical notes with clinical precision, yet his eyes avoided the body. Miss Lyle, theatrical as ever, recounted her letter-writing with a flourish, but Poirot noticed her envelope bore no ink, its edges pristine. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the tension. "One of you knows more than you say. The dagger, the passage, the burned paper, these are pieces of a puzzle. Hercule Poirot will find how they fit." As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, his eyes fixed on the dagger's red wax smudge. "The truth," he said to Japp, "it lies in the smallest details. We must look closer, mon ami, much closer." Japp sighed. "You and your details, Poirot. I'll stick to fingerprints and alibis. But mark my words, this is a family affair. That dagger screams Blackthorn." Poirot smiled enigmatically. "Perhaps, Inspector, but the little grey cells, they whisper of something deeper, a motive not yet revealed." As the storm raged on, Poirot stood alone in the velvet room, the chandelier's light casting his shadow across the crimson walls. The puzzle was complex, but he felt the familiar thrill of the chase. The truth, he knew, was waiting to be uncovered, hidden in the folds of velvet and the secrets of Blackthorn Hall. Chapter 3. The Letters and the Lies. The storm had not abated by morning. Its relentless drumming against Blackthorn Hall's ancient windows, lending a sombre rhythm to the household's unease. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, a cavernous room adjacent to the velvet room, its shelves laden with leather-bound volumes, and the air thick with the scent of old paper. A fire crackled in the grate, casting flickering shadows across the portrait of a long-dead Blackthorn patriarch, whose stern gaze seemed to judge the living. Poirot held the bundle of anonymous letters Sir Reginald had shown him the previous evening, their jagged script stark against the cheap, faintly lavender-scented paper. The words were venomous, each line a coiled threat. "Your time is near. The velvet room will claim you." His grey cells hummed, sensing the letters were a thread in the intricate tapestry of murder. Inspector Japp, nursing a cup of tea, slumped into an armchair. "Those letters, Poirot," he said, his voice gruff with fatigue. "They're the key, aren't they? Someone in this house wrote them, and I'd bet my badge it's the same person who stuck that dagger in Sir Reginald." Poirot's eyes twinkled as he adjusted his pince-nez. "Perhaps, mon ami. But the letters, they are a performance, a distraction. We must look beyond the words to the hand that wrote them. And why?" He held one letter to the light, noting the uneven pressure of the pen, as if the writer had been agitated or disguising their hand. The lavender scent, faint but distinct, suggested a feminine touch. Yet Poirot cautioned himself against hasty assumptions. He summoned the household to the library, their faces a study in contrasts. Lady Eleanor Blackthorn, regal despite the strain etching her features. Charles Blackthorn, slouching with a cigarette dangling from his lips, the scratches on his hands now partially scabbed. Miss Clara Winthrop, her eyes red-rimmed, clutching a handkerchief. Dr. Malcolm Hargrove, composed but with a nervous tick at the corner of his mouth. And Miss Vivian Lyle, her beauty undimmed by the morning light, though her smile seemed forced. Grayson, the butler, stood by the door, his gaunt frame as still as a statue. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding, "these letters, they were sent to Sir Reginald to instill fear. But fear for what purpose? To warn, to punish, or to prepare the stage for murder? I ask each of you, what did you know of these threats?" Lady Eleanor's lips tightened. "I knew nothing of them until Reginald showed them to me last week. They were vile, but I thought them the work of a disgruntled tenant or a spurned business partner. Reginald had many enemies." Her voice was steady, but her fingers twisted the pearls at her throat, a gesture Poirot noted as betraying inner turmoil. Charles exhaled, a plume of smoke, his eyes narrowing. "Father mentioned the letters once, said they were nonsense. I told him to burn them and be done with it. Didn't think anyone here would stoop to such theatrics." His casual tone rang hollow, and Poirot observed the way his gaze flickered toward his mother, as if seeking her reaction. Miss Winthrop's breath hitched. and when Poirot turned his piercing gaze upon her, she shrank back. I never saw them before," she stammered. "They're horrible. Why would anyone write such things?" Her hands trembled, and as Poirot held up one letter, her eyes widened, a flush creeping up her neck. She swayed, and Dr. Hargrove stepped forward to steady her, but she waved him off, murmuring, "They remind me of something from long ago." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And what, mademoiselle, do they remind you of?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "A letter I received once, years ago, when I was a girl. It was cruel, but it's nothing, surely." She looked away, her face pale. Dr. Hargrove cleared his throat, his scholarly demeanour intact. "Sir Reginald showed me one letter, asking if I thought it a prank. I advised him to consult the police, but he refused. He was a stubborn man." His tone was neutral, but Poirot noted the slight clench of his jaw, as if he suppressed a deeper sentiment. Miss Lyle tossed her head, her curls catching the firelight. "Reginald laughed about the letters, called them melodramatic. I told him they were probably from some jealous rival. He had a way of inspiring envy." Her smile was coy, but her eyes darted to Lady Eleanor, who stiffened imperceptibly. Poirot paced slowly, the letters in his hand. "These letters, they are written on paper not found in this house's usual stationery. The lavender scent, it is subtle but unmistakable. And the script, it is deliberately uneven, as if to conceal the writer's true hand. I ask you now, has anyone here purchased such paper, or perhaps received it?" A heavy silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Lady Eleanor spoke first. "I use only monogrammed stationery, Monsieur Poirot. That cheap paper is beneath me." Her tone was icy, but Poirot noted her quick glance at Miss Lyle. Charles shrugged. "Don't write letters much myself. Too busy living, you know." His grin was forced, and Poirot's eyes lingered on the scratches, wondering what altercation had caused them. Miss Winthrop shook her head vehemently. "I write to my sister in York, but on plain paper. I've never seen that kind before." Her voice trembled, and Poirot sensed she was holding something back, though whether from fear or guilt he could not yet determine. Dr. Hargrove adjusted his spectacles. "My correspondence is medical, typed on my office letterhead. I have no use for such things." His calm was almost too perfect, Poirot thought, like a man accustomed to hiding his thoughts. Miss Lyle laughed, a musical sound that grated in the sombre room. "I write to my fans, darling, but my stationery is scented with rose, not lavender, and my handwriting is far more elegant than that scrawl." She fluttered her lashes, but Poirot caught the fleeting tension in her posture. He turned to Grayson, who had remained silent. "And you, Monsieur Grayson? A butler sees much in a household. Have you noticed such paper, perhaps in the servants' quarters?" Grayson's face was impassive. "No, monsieur. The staff use plain notepaper for inventories. I have seen nothing like those letters." His voice was steady, but Poirot noted the slight tightening of his fingers, as if he gripped an invisible burden. "Very well," Poirot said, folding the letters carefully. "I shall keep these for further study. But know this, the truth, it cannot hide forever. The little grey cells, they are already at work." As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered in the library, his eyes drawn to a small writing desk in the corner. He opened its drawers, finding only pens, ink, and monogrammed stationery bearing the Blackthorn crest. But in the wastebasket beneath, he found a crumpled sheet of plain paper, its edge torn as if ripped from a pad. It bore no writing, but its texture was suspiciously similar to the threatening letters. He tucked it into his pocket, his mind racing. Japp joined him, his notebook bristling with scribbled notes. "What's your game, Poirot? You don't think the letters are the whole story, do you? They are a thread, Inspector, but not the tapestry. The letters created fear, yes, but the murder, it was an act of opportunity. We must learn what Sir Reginald feared, and who stood to gain from his death. Poirot's next move was to revisit the Velvet Room, now sealed by Japp's orders. The body had been removed, but the blood-stained rug remained, a stark reminder of the crime. Poirot examined the hidden panel he had discovered the previous night, its mechanism smooth despite years of disuse. He traced the passage again, noting its path through the servants' quarters, but found no new clues. Returning to the room, he studied the mahogany table where the 2 brandy glasses still sat. The half-full glass intrigued him. He sniffed it again, confirming the medicinal undertone. A sedative, perhaps, he mused, or something more sinister. He summoned Dr. Hargrove, who arrived promptly, his medical bag in hand. "Doctor," Poirot said, holding up the glass, "this brandy, it has an unusual odour. Did you prescribe anything for Sir Reginald that might explain it?" Hargrove's face remained calm, but his eyes flickered. "I gave him a mild sedative for his heart condition, taken with water, not brandy. It's possible he mixed it himself, though I advised against alcohol." His voice was steady, but Poirot detected a note of defensiveness. And the dosage, it was sufficient to make him drowsy, oui? Perhaps unable to defend himself? Hargrove's tic returned. "It was a standard dose, Monsieur Poirot. I'm a doctor, not a poisoner." He excused himself, leaving Poirot to ponder the glass's contents. Next, Poirot sought out Miss Winthrop, finding her in the attic schoolroom, surrounded by primers and a chalkboard. Her hands shook as she arranged books, and she started when Poirot entered. "Mademoiselle," he said gently, "your reaction to the letters, it was most profound. Tell me of this memory they stirred." Her eyes filled with tears. "It was years ago, in my first position as a governess. A cruel letter accused me of impropriety with the master of the house. It was false, but it nearly ruined me. Those letters, they brought it all back." She clutched her handkerchief, her voice breaking. Poirot patted her arm. "Your candour, it is appreciated, but tell me, have you ever written such a letter yourself? Perhaps to warn Sir Reginald of danger?" Her eyes widened in horror. "Never! I could never do such a thing." But her flush deepened, and Poirot sensed a truth half buried. As he descended to the main house, Poirot's mind churned. The letters, the passage, the brandy, all were pieces of a puzzle, but the motive remained elusive. Someone in Blackthorn Hall had orchestrated a murder, and the lies they told were as carefully crafted as the velvet drapes that hid the truth. He resolved to press harder, to peel back the layers of deception until the killer stood revealed. Chapter 4. The Hidden Passage. The morning light struggled through the storm-heavy clouds, casting a pallid glow over Blackthorn Hall. The air inside was heavy with the scent of damp stone and the lingering tension of murder. Hercule Poirot stood at the entrance to the hidden passage he had discovered in the Velvet Room, his small torch casting a beam into the narrow, mildewed corridor. The walls, rough-hewn and cold to the touch, seemed to pulse with the secrets of the house. The passage, concealed behind the crimson velvet drapes, had shattered the illusion of a locked-room murder, and Poirot's grey cells were alight with the possibilities it presented. Inspector Japp, his coat still damp from the relentless rain, joined Poirot with a sceptical grunt. "A secret passage, Poirot? This isn't some Gothic novel. You're telling me someone slipped through here, stabbed Sir Reginald, and waltzed out, locking the door behind them?" "Précisément, mon ami," Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. "The passage, it is the key to the method, if not the motive. We must explore its secrets to understand the mind of the killer." He stepped into the corridor, his polished shoes echoing softly on the stone floor, and Japp followed, muttering about the absurdity of old houses. The passage was cramped, its ceiling low enough to force Poirot to duck slightly. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and the air was thick with the musty odour of disuse. The beam of Poirot's torch revealed scuff marks on the floor, faint but recent, suggesting someone had passed through not long ago. The passage twisted downward, its walls narrowing until it reached a small, unmarked door. Poirot pushed it open, revealing the butler's pantry, where a silver tray and polishing cloth sat on a wooden table, just as Grayson had described. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, examining the door's hinges, which were well oiled despite the passage's apparent neglect. "Someone has maintained this exit, Inspector. It was used deliberately, with forethought." Japp scratched his chin. "Grayson, then? He's the butler. Knows every nook of this place. Said he was polishing silver when the scream went up. But this passage puts him right in the frame." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Perhaps, but we must not leap to conclusions. The passage, it is known to others, I suspect. We must question its history and its users." He returned to the velvet room, where the blood-stained rug had been covered with a sheet at Japp's insistence, though the dagger remained on the mahogany table, its jade handle catching the light. Poirot's attention turned to the smudge of red wax he had noted on the dagger's handle. He produced a magnifying glass, studying the residue closely. "This wax, it is not from a candle, Inspector. It is sealing wax, of the kind used for private correspondence. And yet, the letters we found bore no such seals. A curious discrepancy, n'est-ce pas?" Japp frowned. "You think the killer sealed something with wax, then handled the dagger? Sloppy work, if you ask me. Or deliberate," Poirot countered. "The wax, it is a clue to the killer's actions before the crime. We must find its source." He summoned Grayson, who appeared with his usual stoic demeanour, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease as they fell on the open panel. "Monsieur Grayson," Poirot began, his voice smooth but probing. "This passage, it leads to your pantry. You claimed to be polishing silver when the scream was heard. Yet this route suggests you could have entered the velvet room unseen. What say you?" Grayson's face paled, but his voice remained steady. "I swear, monsieur, I knew nothing of that passage's use. It's an old relic from the days when the Blackthorns hid priests during the Reformation. I've never set foot in it." His hands clasped tightly behind his back, and Poirot noted the slight tremor in his fingers. "And yet, the hinges, they are oiled?" Poirot pressed. "Someone has used this passage recently. Who else in this house might know of it?" Grayson hesitated. "The family, perhaps. Sir Reginald once mentioned it as a curiosity, but I thought it sealed long ago. The servants, we don't speak of such things." His eyes darted to the floor, and Poirot sensed a half-truth, though he did not press further. Next, Poirot sought out Lady Eleanor, finding her in the conservatory, where she stood among wilting orchids, her black mourning dress stark against the greenery. Her face was composed, but her eyes were red, as if she had wept in private. "Madame," Poirot said, bowing slightly, "the passage behind the velvet room's drapes. Were you aware of its existence?" Her lips pursed. "I knew of it, yes. An old family secret, rarely spoken of. Reginald used to jest about hiding from creditors in there, but it's been forgotten for years." Her voice was steady, but her fingers tightened on a small pruning shear, and Poirot wondered if her composure masked a deeper fear. Did Sir Reginald ever use it, perhaps to meet someone in secret? Poirot asked, his tone gentle but insistent. Lady Eleanor's eyes flashed. "If you're implying an affair, Monsieur Poirot, I assure you I turned a blind eye to Reginald's indiscretions. I had no need to skulk through passages to spy on him." Her words were sharp, but Poirot detected a wound beneath her pride. He next questioned Charles, who was lounging in the billiard room, a glass of whisky in hand despite the early hour. The scratches on his hands were more pronounced in the daylight, and Poirot noted a faint bruise on his knuckles. "Monsieur Charles," he said, "the passage to the velvet room, did you know of it?" Charles smirked, taking a sip. "Heard stories as a boy, Thought it was just a tale to scare the servants. Never went looking for it myself." His nonchalance was practiced, but his eyes flickered toward the door, as if expecting an interruption. "And these scratches," Poirot said, pointing to Charles' hands. "How did you come by them?" Charles glanced at his hands, then shrugged. "Brambles, probably. Took a walk in the grounds yesterday. Got caught in some thorns." His explanation was too quick, and Poirot's grey cells stirred, sensing a lie. Miss Clara Winthrop was next, found in the drawing-room, mending a tear in a child's smock. Her hands trembled as she worked, and her eyes darted to Poirot as he entered. "Mademoiselle," he said softly, "the passage behind the velvet room's drapes. Have you ever heard of it?" Her needle paused, and she shook her head. "No, monsieur. I keep to my quarters in the schoolroom. I don't pry into the house's secrets." Her voice was faint, and Poirot noted the way her fingers clutched the fabric, as if anchoring herself against fear. Dr. Hargrove, when questioned in his study, admitted to vague knowledge of the passage. Sir Reginald mentioned it once, as a historical quirk. I never thought it functional. His calm was unshaken, but Poirot observed a slight sheen of sweat on his brow, unusual for the cool room. Miss Vivian Lyle, found in her guest suite applying makeup before a gilded mirror, laughed at the question. "A secret passage? How deliciously dramatic! No, darling, I had no idea. I prefer my entrances to be grand, not sneaky." Her levity was forced, and Poirot noted a crumpled letter on her dressing table, its edge torn but unsealed. Returning to the velvet room, Poirot examined the mahogany table again, focusing on the decanter and glasses. He sent the half-full glass to Japp for analysis, suspecting the medicinal odour indicated tampering. Then he turned to the desk where Sir Reginald had kept his papers. Among the ledgers and correspondence, he found a small stick of red sealing wax, its end recently used. "Aha!" he said, holding it up. "The wax on the dagger. It matches this, but what was sealed, and by whom?" He summoned Miss Winthrop again, her earlier reaction to the letters still fresh in his mind. When shown the stick of wax, she gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. That's mine," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I used it to seal a letter to my sister, but I swear I never touched the dagger." Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone was firm. "And yet, mademoiselle, the wax is found on the murder weapon. Tell me, did you write any other letters, perhaps to Sir Reginald, to warn him of danger?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I wrote one letter. Not a threat, but a warning. I overheard talk in the village. Rumours that someone meant him harm over a business deal. I slipped it under his door, sealed with that wax. I meant to help, not hurt." Her sobs were genuine, but Poirot wondered if her warning had been misinterpreted or exploited. Japp, overhearing, shook his head. "This is getting murkier by the minute, Poirot. The passage, the wax, the letters, how do they fit?" Poirot smiled enigmatically. "Like a mosaic, Inspector. Each piece seems disparate, but together they form a picture. The passage gave access, the wax points to intent, and the letters, they set the stage. We are close, mon ami, to uncovering the truth." As he left the velvet room, Poirot's mind churned with possibilities. The passage had opened new avenues, but the motive remained shrouded. Someone had used the house's secrets to commit murder, and Poirot was determined to shine a light into every shadowed corner until the killer was revealed. Chapter 5. The Actress's Secret. The storm had settled into a sullen drizzle by midday, cloaking Blackthorn Hall in a mist that blurred the edges of its Gothic spires. Hercule Poirot stood in the guest wing, outside the door to Miss Vivian Lyle's suite, his gloved hand poised to knock. The actress's theatrical charm and evasive answers had lingered in his mind, her every gesture a performance that concealed as much as it revealed. The crumpled letter he had glimpsed on her dressing table, its torn edge hinting at secrets, demanded further scrutiny. Poirot's grey cells buzzed with the certainty that Miss Lyle held a piece of the puzzle surrounding Sir Reginald Blackthorne's murder. He knocked, and her voice, bright and melodious, called, "Enter, darling." The suite was a riot of extravagance. Silk cushions strewn across a chaise longue, perfume bottles glittering on a vanity, and a wardrobe spilling with satin gowns. Miss Lyle sat before her mirror, applying rouge with a practised hand, her emerald dressing gown slipping artfully off one shoulder. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, turning with a dazzling smile, "to what do I owe this delightful visit?" Poirot bowed, his eyes sharp behind his pince-nez. "Mademoiselle Lyle, I come to discuss matters most serious. The murder of Sir Reginald. It is a tragedy that demands truth, and I believe you know more than you have shared." Her laugh was like the tinkle of champagne glasses, but her eyes flickered with unease. "Oh, you do flatter me, thinking I'm hiding some grand secret. I'm an open book, darling. Ask away." She gestured to a velvet chair, but Poirot remained standing, his posture rigid. He produced the crumpled letter from his pocket, its torn edge stark against the lavender-scented paper. "This, mademoiselle, was found in your wastebasket. Its script matches the threatening letters sent to Sir Reginald. Can you explain?" Miss Lyle's smile faltered, her hand pausing mid-air. "A letter? Why, I discard dozens of notes, fan letters, invitations, you know how it is." She waved dismissively, but Poirot noted the tightening of her jaw, the slight tremor in her fingers. "This is no fan letter," he said, his voice soft but unrelenting. "The script, it is jagged, like those that promise death in the velvet room. And the scent, lavender, not your preferred rose. Why, mademoiselle, would you discard such a thing?" She rose, her movements graceful but deliberate, and crossed to a decanter of sherry, pouring herself a glass. "You're fishing, Monsieur Poirot. I'm an actress, not a poison-pen writer. Perhaps someone used my paper. This house is full of sneaky types." Her tone was light, but her eyes avoided his, focusing on the amber liquid in her glass. Poirot stepped closer, his voice lowering to a near whisper. "Mademoiselle, I have seen your photograph with Sir Reginald, one most intimate. It was hidden in his study, a memento of affection. You claimed you were mere friends, but the heart, it does not lie. What was your true connection to the victim?" Miss Lyle's composure cracked, her glass clinking against the vanity as she set it down. "Very well," she said, her voice dropping its theatrical lilt. "Reginald and I were lovers. It began last summer, at a London gala. He was charming, generous and lonely. I didn't care about his money or his title. Whatever Eleanor might think, I loved him." Her eyes glistened, but Poirot wondered if the tears were as practised as her smile. "And the letters?" he pressed. "Did you write them to frighten him? Perhaps to force a decision, marriage, or a break with his wife?" She spun to face him, her cheeks flushed. "I wrote those wretched letters, yes, but not to kill him. I wanted him to leave Eleanor, to choose me. I thought a little fear might push him to act. But I swear, I didn't touch that dagger." Her voice broke, and she sank onto the chaise, her hands covering her face. Poirot studied her, his mind sifting truth from performance. "And the night of the murder, mademoiselle, you claim to be writing letters in this room. Yet your envelope bore no ink and your pen was dry. Where were you, truly?" She hesitated, her fingers twisting the hem of her gown. I was in the corridor, near the velvet room. I wanted to speak to Reginald, to beg him to reconsider. I heard voices, his and another's, angry but muffled. I didn't dare interrupt. Then I returned here, and soon after, the scream came." Her eyes met his, pleading. "I didn't see who it was, I swear." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Voices, you say? A man or a woman?" "I couldn't tell," she admitted. "The door was thick, the storm loud. But it was heated, like an argument. He nodded, filing the detail away. One final question, mademoiselle. The red wax on the dagger's handle. Have you sealed any letters with such wax? She shook her head vehemently. No, never. I use blue wax always. You can check my desk. She gestured to the vanity, where a stick of blue sealing wax lay beside a silver seal. Poirot examined it, confirming her claim. Merci, mademoiselle. Your candour, it is appreciated, though the truth, it is still unfolding. He left her suite, her soft sobs echoing behind him. In the corridor, Poirot paused, his mind racing. Miss Lyle's admission explained the letters, but her presence near the velvet room raised new questions. Had she truly only overheard an argument, or had she played a more active role? The absence of red wax in her possession pointed elsewhere, perhaps to Miss Winthrop, whose sealing wax matched the dagger's smudge. He sought out Inspector Japp in the library, where the inspector was poring over a map of the estate. Well, Poirot, Japp said, looking up. Any luck with the actress? She's a slippery one, I'll bet. She confesses to the letters, Poirot replied, but not to the murder. She claims to have heard an argument near the velvet room, yet could not identify the voices. We must verify her story. Japp snorted. Lovers' quarrel gone wrong, maybe. She's got motive, if Sir Reginald was stringing her along. Perhaps, Poirot said, but the dagger, the wax, the passage, they suggest a plan, not a passion. We must look to the others. He turned his attention to the household's alibis, summoning Charles Blackthorne next. The young man was found in the smoking room, a whiskey bottle half empty beside him. His eyes were bloodshot, his scratches now bandaged, though poorly. Monsieur Charles, Poirot began, Miss Lyle claims she heard an argument near the velvet room before the murder. Were you there, perhaps confronting your father? Charles's laugh was bitter. Me? I was in the billiard room, like I said. Had a row with the old man earlier, sure, about money. He cut me off, said I was a disgrace, but I didn't go near the velvet room after dinner. His fingers drummed nervously on the armrest, and Poirot noted a fresh cut on his thumb, not present the previous day. And these injuries? Poirot asked, pointing to the bandages. Brambles, you said. Yet they seem fresh, as if from a struggle. Charles's eyes narrowed. I told you, I got caught in the grounds. Maybe I scratched myself again this morning. What's it to you? His defiance was brittle, and Poirot sensed a lie, though its shape remained unclear. Next, Poirot questioned Dr. Hargrove, who was cataloguing medicines in his study. The doctor's calm demeanour faltered when Poirot mentioned the brandy glass's medicinal odour. I prescribed a sedative for Sir Reginald's heart, Hargrove said, his voice steady, but his hands fidgeting with a vial. Taken with water, as I told you. If he mixed it with brandy, that was his folly. And the dosage, Poirot said, was it strong enough to render him helpless? Hargrove's tic returned. It was standard, Monsieur Poirot. I'm no quack. I'd never endanger a patient. But his eyes darted to a locked drawer, and Poirot made a mental note to investigate further. Finally, Poirot spoke with Lady Eleanor in the drawing-room, where she sat embroidering a black mourning band. Her composure was ironclad, but her needlework was uneven, betraying agitation. Madame, Poirot said, Miss Lyle claims to have heard an argument near the velvet room. Did you perhaps confront your husband about his indiscretions? Her needle paused, and her eyes met his, cold and unyielding. I had no need to confront Reginald. His affairs were his own, and I bore them with dignity. I was in my room, as I told you, reading. Her voice was steady, but Poirot noted the faint tremble in her hand, as if the needle were a weapon she longed to wield. As he left the drawing-room, Poirot's mind churned. Miss Lyle's confession had illuminated one corner of the mystery, but the voices she heard suggested another presence in the velvet room. The red wax, the scratches, the sedative, All pointed to a conspiracy, or at least a convergence of motives. He resolved to examine the locked drawer in Hargrove's study, and to press Miss Winthrop further about her warning letter. The truth, he knew, was close, hidden in the delicate threads of lies spun by Blackthorn Hall's inhabitants. Chapter 6. The Doctor's Confession. The drizzle had thickened into a steady rain once more, cloaking Blackthorn Hall in a shroud of grey that seemed to mirror the mounting tension within its walls. Hercule Poirot stood in the corridor outside Dr. Malcolm Hargrove's study, his keen eyes fixed on the locked drawer the doctor had glanced at during their last conversation. The faint medicinal odour in Sir Reginald Blackthorn's brandy glass, the nervous tick in Hargrove's cheek, and the locked drawer all pointed to a secret the physician was guarding. Poirot's grey cells churned, sensing that the truth behind the murder in the velvet room was drawing closer, like a shadow sharpening in the light. He knocked, and Dr. Hargrove's voice, clipped but polite, called, "Come in." The study was a small, orderly space, its walls lined with medical texts and charts, a stark contrast to the opulence of the rest of the hall. Hargrove sat at a desk, his spectacles low on his nose, a ledger open before him. The locked drawer, a sturdy oak compartment built into the desk, was within arm's reach. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, rising with a forced smile, "how may I assist you now?" Poirot's expression was courteous but unyielding. "Doctor, the brandy glass in the velvet room, it contained a substance not merely alcoholic. I suspect a sedative, one stronger than you admitted prescribing for Sir Reginald. And this drawer," he gestured to it, "it holds something you wish to conceal. Will you open it, or shall I ask Inspector Japp to do so with force?" Hargrove's face paled, his tic more pronounced. "You're mistaken, Monsieur Poirot. That drawer contains only patient records, confidential by nature." His hand moved protectively toward the desk, a gesture Poirot noted with interest. "Then you will not object to my examination," Poirot said, his tone leaving no room for refusal. "The truth, Doctor. It is a patient that cannot be kept waiting." Hargrove hesitated, his fingers twitching, then produced a small key from his waistcoat pocket. With a reluctant sigh, he unlocked the drawer and slid it open. Inside were several vials of clear liquid, a syringe, and a bundle of papers tied with string. Poirot's gloved hand lifted one vial, its label reading chloral hydrate. He raised an eyebrow. "A powerful sedative, Docteur. Far stronger than a standard dose for a heart condition. Why keep such a thing under lock and key?" Hargrove's shoulders sagged, and he sank into his chair, his scholarly composure crumbling. "Very well, Monsieur Poirot. I'll tell you the truth, but I beg you to understand, I meant no harm." His voice was low, almost a whisper, as if the walls themselves might betray him. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes piercing. "Speak, Doctor. The little grey cells, they listen." Hargrove removed his spectacles, rubbing his eyes. "Sir Reginald was not just my patient, he was my creditor. Years ago, I fell into debt gambling, a weakness I've since overcome. He loaned me a substantial sum, but at a price. He held my IOUs, threatening to expose me to the medical board if I didn't comply with his demands. Last month, he pressed me to increase his sedative dose, claiming his heart palpitations were worsening. I complied, but I tampered with the dose the night he died." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Tampered? Docteur, explain." "I added a small amount of chloral hydrate to his usual prescription," Hargrove confessed, his voice trembling. "Not enough to kill, I swear, but enough to make him sleep deeply. He'd been erratic, paranoid about those letters. I thought if he slept, I could search his study for my IOUs, destroy them, and be free of his hold. I mixed it into his brandy myself, after dinner, when he asked for a nightcap." Poirot's eyes narrowed, and this made him defenceless, unable to resist when the dagger struck. "Your actions, Docteur, they facilitated murder. even if you did not wield the blade." Hargrove's head dropped into his hands. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I only wanted my life back. When I heard the scream, I was in my study, too afraid to check the velvet room. I knew something terrible had occurred." His voice broke, and Poirot saw genuine remorse, though whether for the crime or his own ruin, he could not yet discern. "And the IOUs?" Poirot asked. "Did you find them?" Hargrove shook his head. "I never got the chance. The scream came before I could search. They're still in his study, I presume, locked in his safe." Poirot filed this away, his mind racing. The sedative explained Sir Reginald's vulnerability, but the passage, the wax and the dagger pointed to another hand. He thanked Hargrove, warning him to remain available, and left the study, his thoughts turning to the safe in Sir Reginald's study. He found Inspector Japp in the dining room, reviewing notes over a cold cup of tea. "Well, Poirot," Japp said, looking up, "any breakthroughs?" "I've got the lab report on that brandy glass. Traces of chloral hydrate, just as you suspected." Poirot nodded. "Dr. Hargrove has confessed to tampering with the dose, hoping to search for incriminating papers while Sir Reginald slept. But he claims no part in the murder itself. We must now examine Sir Reginald's safe, mon ami. It may hold the key to his killer's motive." The study, a small room off the main hall, was lined with oak cabinets and dominated by a portrait of Sir Reginald in his youth, his eyes cold and commanding. The safe, concealed behind a false panel, was a modern affair with a combination lock. Japp, with Grayson's reluctant assistance, retrieved the combination from Lady Eleanor, who provided it with a tight-lipped expression. "Reginald kept his private papers there," she said. "I never pried." The safe opened to reveal a stack of documents, including a bundle of IOUs bearing Hargrove's signature, confirming his story. But beneath them, Poirot found a single sheet of lavender-scented paper, its script matching the threatening letters. It read, "Your secrets will bury you. The velvet room awaits." Unlike the others, it was sealed with red wax, the same as that found on the dagger. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, holding the letter to the light. This was not sent. It was kept, perhaps, as leverage or a taunt. Japp frowned. "So the killer wrote this one too, but didn't send it. Why keep it in the safe?" "To control the narrative," Poirot replied. "The letters were a distraction, but this one, it was personal. We must find who had access to this safe." He questioned Lady Eleanor again, finding her in the conservatory, tending to her orchids with a precision that belied her grief. "Madame," he said, "the safe in your husband's study. Did you know its contents?" Her pruning shears paused. "I knew he kept business papers there, but not their specifics. Reginald was secretive, even with me." Her voice was steady, but Poirot noted the faint quiver in her hand, as if the shears were a shield. "And the combination," he pressed. "Who else might have known it?" She hesitated. "Charles, perhaps. Reginald trusted him with some matters, despite their quarrels. And Grayson, of course. He handled Reginald's correspondence." Her eyes met Poirot's, and he sensed a guarded truth, as if she knew more than she admitted. Next, Poirot sought Charles, who was in the billiard room, his face haggard from drink. "Monsieur Charles," Poirot said, "the safe in your father's study. Did you know its combination?" Charles's eyes narrowed, his cue stick pausing mid-stroke. "Might have. Father gave it to me once, for some estate papers. Why?" His tone was defensive, and Poirot noted a fresh bandage on his hand, the cut from earlier now joined by another. "And did you ever open it, perhaps to retrieve something, or to place something there?" Poirot held up the sealed letter, watching Charles's reaction. The young man's face flushed. "Never saw that before. If it's one of those damned letters, it's nothing to do with me." But his eyes lingered on the wax, and Poirot sensed a flicker of recognition. As the day waned, Poirot returned to the velvet room, standing before the hidden panel. The sedative, the safe, the wax all pointed to a calculated crime, yet the killer's identity remained elusive. Hargrove's confession had illuminated one piece of the puzzle, but the voices Miss Lyle heard, the scratches on Charles' hands and Lady Eleanor's guarded demeanour suggested a deeper conspiracy. Poirot's grey cells worked tirelessly, piecing together the fragments of truth hidden in the shadows of Blackthorn Hall. Chapter 7. The Final Revelation. The rain had ceased at last, leaving Blackthorn Hall swathed in a damp silence that seemed to amplify the weight of its secrets. Hercule Poirot stood in the velvet room, its crimson walls glowing faintly under the chandelier's light. The blood-stained rug now removed, but the memory of Sir Reginald Blackthorn's murder indelible. The pieces of the puzzle, the hidden passage, the red wax, the tampered sedative, the threatening letters, had begun to coalesce in Poirot's mind, forming a picture as intricate as the Persian rug that once lay beneath the victim. Tonight, he would gather the household and unravel the truth, for the little grey cells had completed their work. Inspector Japp, pacing by the mahogany table, looked weary but expectant. "You've got that look, Poirot," he said, his voice tinged with anticipation. "You've cracked it, haven't you? Going to tell us who stuck that dagger in Sir Reginald?" Poirot's eyes twinkled, but his expression was grave. "Oui, mon ami. The truth, it is like a fine tapestry. Each thread must be placed just so. Tonight, we shall see the pattern complete." He clapped his hands, signalling Grayson to summon the household. They assembled in the velvet room, their faces a gallery of tension and suspicion. Lady Eleanor Blackthorn sat erect, her mourning dress a stark contrast to her pale complexion, her eyes sharp with unspoken questions. Charles Blackthorn slouched in a chair, a cigarette smouldering between his fingers, the bandages on his hands fraying. Miss Clara Winthrop hovered near the door, her handkerchief twisted into a knot, her eyes darting nervously. Dr. Malcolm Hargrove stood with his arms crossed, his scholarly calm strained by the weight of his earlier confession. Miss Vivian Lyle, in a subdued grey dress that did little to dim her allure, leaned against the table, her gaze defiant yet wary. Grayson remained by the entrance, his gaunt face impassive, but his posture rigid. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice resonant in the hushed room, "a crime has been committed in this room, a murder most foul. Sir Reginald Blackthorn was struck down by a dagger, in a room locked from within, yet accessible by a hidden passage. The clues, the letters, the wax, the sedative, the scratches, have led Hercule Poirot to the truth. Let us reconstruct the crime, step by step, to reveal the hand that wielded the blade." He paced slowly, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. "First, the letters. Mademoiselle Lyle, you confessed to writing them, hoping to frighten Sir Reginald into leaving his wife. Your motive was love, or perhaps ambition, but the letters, they served another purpose. They created an atmosphere of fear, making Sir Reginald vulnerable, distracted. Yet one letter, found in his safe, was never sent, sealed with red wax. This was no coincidence." Miss Lyle's lips parted, but Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, mademoiselle. We shall return to you." He turned to Dr. Hargrove. "Docteur, you admitted to tampering with Sir Reginald's sedative, adding chloral hydrate to his brandy. You wished to search for your IOUs, to free yourself from his hold. Your actions left him defenseless, unable to resist the fatal blow. You did not intend murder, but you paved its path." Hargrove's face crumpled, his tic pronounced. "I've told you, I didn't kill him," he murmured, but his voice lacked conviction. Poirot nodded. "Indeed, docteur. Your role was unwitting but crucial. Now, the passage, concealed behind these drapes." He gestured to the velvet wall. "It allowed the killer to enter and leave unseen, locking the door to create the illusion of a mystery. Monsieur Grayson, you claimed ignorance of its use, Yet the oiled hinges suggest someone knew it well. Perhaps a servant, or perhaps a member of the family. Grayson's eyes flickered, but he remained silent, his hands clasped tightly. Poirot's gaze shifted to Lady Eleanor. "Madam, you knew of the passage, a family secret. You bore your husband's infidelity with dignity, but the heart, it can harbour resentment. Did you use the passage to confront him, perhaps in anger?" Lady Eleanor's eyes flashed. "I had no need to skulk through passages, Monsieur Poirot. My grievances with Reginald were private, not murderous." Her voice was steady, but Poirot noted the faint tremor in her fingers, clutching her mourning band. He turned to Miss Winthrop, whose face was pale as moonlight. "Mademoiselle, you wrote a warning letter to Sir Reginald, sealed with red wax, fearing for his safety. Yet the wax on the dagger matches yours. Did you, in a moment of desperation, act beyond a warning?" Her eyes widened, and she shook her head frantically. "No, no! I only wanted to help him. I never touched that dagger." Her voice broke into a sob, and Poirot's expression softened, sensing her sincerity. Finally, he faced Charles Blackthorne, whose cigarette had burned to ash, unnoticed. "Monsieur Charles, you are the key. Your scratches, your bruises, your access to the safe's combination, they tell a story. You argued with your father that night, over debts he refused to pay. You knew the passage, a boyhood secret. You entered the velvet room, unseen while Sir Reginald slept under the sedative's influence. In a moment of rage, you seized the family dagger and struck." Charles leapt to his feet, his face flushed. "That's nonsense! I was in the billiard room, I told you! You've got no proof!" His voice was shrill, and the bandages on his hands slipped, revealing fresh cuts. Poirot's voice was calm, but relentless. "The proof, it is in the details. The scratches, they are not from brambles, but from a struggle. Perhaps with your father as he tried to resist, even in his drugged state. The red wax on the dagger, it came from a false IOU you forged, hoping to cover your debts. You sealed it with wax from Miss Winthrop's desk, which you took during a visit to the schoolroom, perhaps under the pretense of checking on your nephew's lessons. The letter in the safe, it was your attempt to mimic the threats, to cast suspicion elsewhere." Charles's eyes darted to the door, but Japp stepped forward, his hand on his handcuffs. "You can't prove any of this!" Charles shouted, his voice cracking. "It's all conjecture!" Poirot smiled, a cold, triumphant smile. "The little grey cells, they do not conjecture. The wax, it matches Miss Winthrop's, but she had no motive to kill. The passage, it was your path, known from childhood games. The scratches, they betray your struggle. And the safe, you opened it to plant the letter, but forgot to wipe the wax from the dagger's handle. Your carelessness, Monsieur Charles. It is your undoing." Lady Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Miss Lyle's eyes widened, and Hargrove shook his head, as if relieved to be spared. Miss Winthrop sobbed quietly, and Grayson's stoic mask slipped, revealing a flicker of shock. Charles lunged for the door, but Japp was faster, seizing him by the arm. "You're nicked, lad," Japp said, snapping on the handcuffs. "We'll sort the rest at the station." Poirot raised a hand. "One moment, Inspector. Let us clarify the sequence. Charles, in debt and desperate, saw an opportunity when the letters, written by Mademoiselle Lyle, created fear. Dr. Hargrove's sedative provided the means, rendering Sir Reginald helpless. Charles used the passage, known only to the family, to enter the velvet room. In a fit of rage, fueled by his father's refusal to pay his debts, he struck with the dagger, a family heirloom within reach. He locked the door to create a mystery, but the wax, the scratches, and the passage betrayed him. Charles sagged in Japp's grip, his defiance crumbling. "He called me a failure," he muttered. "Said I'd never inherit. I didn't mean to. It just happened." Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice remained firm. "Murder, Monsieur Charles. It is never just. It is a choice, and now you face its consequences." As Japp led Charles away, the room fell silent, the weight of the revelation settling over the household like dust. Poirot stood alone, his gaze fixed on the chandelier, its light now dimmed by the truth. The velvet room had claimed its victim, but Hercule Poirot had claimed its secrets. Chapter 8. The Aftermath. The sun broke through the clouds at last, casting a pale, tentative light over Blackthorn Hall, as if nature itself sought to cleanse the stain of murder from its ancient stones. The velvet room, now stripped of its blood-stained rug, and sealed by Inspector Japp's orders, stood silent, its crimson walls bearing witness to the tragedy and its resolution. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand hall, his valise packed, his impeccable suit as pristine as ever, though his eyes carried the weight of the truth he had uncovered. The arrest of Charles Blackthorn had shattered the household, yet it had restored a fragile order, and Poirot's task was complete. Lady Eleanor Blackthorn approached, her mourning dress replaced by a sombre grey gown, her silver hair tightly pinned. Her face, though etched with grief, held a dignity that commanded respect. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but softened by gratitude, "you have done us a great service, though it brings me no joy to see my son in chains. How can I thank you for unveiling the truth?" Poirot bowed, his moustache twitching slightly. "Madam, the truth, it is its own reward, though it comes at a cost. Your strength, it has sustained this house through its darkest hour. I wish you peace in the days ahead." She nodded, a flicker of pain crossing her features. "Charles was always reckless, but I never imagined I shall manage the estate for my grandson Henry. He deserves a legacy untainted by this horror." She extended a gloved hand, which Poirot took briefly, noting the firmness of her grip, a testament to her resolve. Miss Clara Winthrop was next to seek him out, her mousy demeanour softened by relief. She stood in the corridor, a small suitcase at her feet, her eyes no longer shadowed by fear. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling but clear, "I've resigned my post. I can't stay here, not after everything. I'm going to my sister in York to start anew. Thank you for believing I meant no harm." Poirot's eyes were kind. "Mademoiselle, your heart, it is pure, though it was caught in the web of others' deceit. Your warning letter, it was an act of courage. Go, and find the tranquillity you seek." She smiled faintly, curtsied, and departed, her steps lighter than they had been in days. Dr. Malcolm Hargrove, summoned to the police station to face charges for his role in tampering with the sedative, had left earlier, escorted by one of Japp's constables. Poirot had glimpsed him in the courtyard, his scholarly air replaced by a defeated slump. The doctor's confession had been pivotal, yet his negligence had made the murder possible, and Poirot knew the law would not be kind. He felt a pang of pity for the man, whose weakness had ensnared him in a tragedy not entirely of his making. Miss Vivian Lyle was preparing to leave for London, her trunks packed with the flair of a theatrical exit. Poirot found her in the drawing-room, adjusting a feathered hat before a mirror. Her beauty remained undimmed, but the sparkle in her eyes had dulled, as if the stage of Blackthorn Hall had lost its allure. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, turning with a half-smile, "you've made quite the drama of this place. I suppose I should thank you for clearing my name, though I'll miss Reginald terribly." Poirot's expression was neutral. "Mademoiselle, your letters set this tragedy in motion, though you did not wield the dagger. Love, it can blind us to consequences. I trust you will choose your roles more wisely in the future." She nodded, her smile fading, and swept out, her departure as grand as her entrance had been. Grayson, the butler, remained in his post, his gaunt face resuming its stoic mask. Poirot encountered him in the pantry, polishing silver with the same meticulous care as before. "Monsieur Grayson," Poirot said, "you served this house loyally. Yet the passage, it was a secret you kept. Why?" Grayson's hands paused, his eyes meeting Poirot's. "Was not my place to speak of family secrets, monsieur. I saw nothing, heard nothing that night. My duty is to the house, not its scandals." His voice was firm, but Poirot sensed a lingering guilt, perhaps for failing to protect his master. He nodded, leaving the butler to his task, knowing Grayson's silence had been no crime, only loyalty misplaced. As Poirot prepared to depart, Inspector Japp joined him in the courtyard, where the Rolls-Royce waited to return him to London. The inspector's ruddy face was creased with a grin. "Another triumph, Poirot," he said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You had me fooled with all that talk of wax and passages, but you nailed young Charles in the end. How do you do it, eh?" Poirot's eyes twinkled, though his voice was modest. "Order and method, mon ami. The little grey cells, they observe, they connect, they reveal. The scratches, the wax, the safe. These were the threads, and Charles, he wove them into his own noose." Japp chuckled. "Well, you've saved my bacon again. The chief'll be pleased, though he'll never admit it. Safe travels, Poirot. Try not to stumble into another murder before you reach London." Poirot smiled, adjusting his hat. "I make no promises, Inspector. The world, it is full of mysteries, and Hercule Poirot, he is never far from them." He stepped into the car, the engine purring to life, and as Blackthorn Hall receded into the mist, he felt the familiar satisfaction of a case resolved. The Velvet Room had surrendered its secrets, and the truth, as always, had prevailed.